You've eaten their burgers. You've stood in their lines. You've paid prices that made you briefly question your choices until you took the first bite. Five Guys is everywhere. At 1,900 locations across 30 countries, over $3 billion in global sales, with a cult following so loyal it borders on irrational. But do you know the family behind this massive empire? And most importantly, how did they build a burger company so massive in the era of McDonald's and KFC? Sit tight as we answer these questions in this video. The family you've never heard of. Walk into any Five Guys in the world right now and the first thing you notice is what's missing. No self-service kiosks, no drive-thru window, no frozen patties being peeled off a stack in a walk-in freezer. Just a line, a grill, and someone hand-forming beef into burgers that were delivered fresh this morning. It looks almost aggressively simple, and that simplicity is the whole point. Because behind it sits one of the most deliberately invisible family empires in American business history. Their name is Murrell. Jerry and Janie Murrell, 5 sons, 14 grandchildren, and a burger company currently valued somewhere between $2 and $5 billion, depending on which analyst you ask. They have never taken the company public. They have never sold a controlling stake to private equity. They have turned down acquisition offers that would have made the entire family generationally wealthy 10 times over. And they did it without breaking a sweat, because the Murrells decided a long time ago that control was worth more than any number a buyer could put on a term sheet. While McDonald's was answering to Wall Street and Burger King was getting passed between private equity firms like a used car, the Murrells were quietly building a global empire from a single takeout counter in Arlington, Virginia, on a philosophy so straightforward it almost sounds like a joke. Make a really good burger. Never freeze anything. Pay your people well. Don't advertise. Trust the product. 4 decades later, that philosophy is generating over $3 billion a year in system-wide sales. And the family running it still personally signs off on new pickle vendors before a single jar gets anywhere near one of their stores. That level of obsession doesn't come from a business school curriculum. It comes from somewhere much more personal, and the story of how the Murrells got here is strange and specific and genuinely fascinating in ways the burger wrapper never tells you. The decision that started everything. The year is 1986, and Jerry Murrell is sitting across from his 3 oldest sons with a very unusual proposition. The family has money saved. Not a fortune, but enough. And Jerry lays out the choice with the kind of directness that would later define how he ran a company. You can take this money and go to college, he tells them, or we can use it to start a business together. Jim, Matt, and Chad Murrell looked at that offer, looked at each other, and chose the burger joint. The initial investment was less than $70,000. Jerry, who had spent years as a financial planner before this, wasn't operating on blind faith. He was operating on a principle his mother had handed down to him with the quiet confidence of someone who'd lived through enough to know what holds. In America, she told him, if you provide a genuinely good version of a basic thing, a good haircut, a good drink, a good hamburger, you will never go hungry. Jerry took that idea, applied a financial planner's discipline to it, and opened a single takeout counter in Arlington with no dining room, no frills, and no plan to become anything other than the best burger in the neighborhood. What happened instead is that people kept coming back, and then they started bringing other people, and then those people started driving across town, and then across county lines, and suddenly Jerry Murrell had a problem that most small business owners would consider a luxury. More demand than he could handle from a single location. A year after opening, Janie gave birth to their 5th son, Tyler, and the name Five Guys found its permanent meaning. Originally, the name referred to Jerry and his first 4 boys. After Tyler arrived, the identity shifted entirely to the 5 brothers, and Jerry quietly stepped out of the namesake to take his place as the patriarch behind it. That detail, small as it sounds, tells you something essential about how this family operates. Jerry Murrell was never building a monument to himself. He was building something for his sons to inherit and run, and eventually hand to their own children. The ego was always secondary to the architecture. By the early 2000s, with the original location long since proven, the Murrells made the decision to franchise, and what followed was one of the most explosive expansions in fast food history. In 2002, they had 5 locations. By 2003, they had sold franchise rights to 300 units in a single year. The line of people wanting to buy into the Five Guys model stretched further than anyone in the family had anticipated, and the burger that started as a neighborhood secret was suddenly a national conversation. The cult of simplicity. Why they refuse to change anything. Here is where the Five Guys story gets genuinely interesting, because the natural move for any company experiencing that kind of growth is to expand the menu, streamline the supply chain, cut costs wherever the customer won't immediately notice, and start optimizing for margin. It's what every major fast food chain does. It's what the entire industry runs on. And the Murrells looked at that playbook and threw it in the garbage. There are no freezers in a Five Guys. Not a single one. Every location globally operates with coolers only, because the beef arrives fresh every day and gets hand-formed into patties on site. And if that supply chain fails for any reason, the store doesn't open. That's the deal. The logistical complexity of maintaining fresh beef delivery across 1,900 locations in 30 countries is enormous, and the Murrells chose it deliberately over the far simpler alternative of just freezing the product like every competitor does. They chose the harder path because the harder path produces the better burger, and the better burger is the only competitive advantage they've ever needed. The buns are their own proprietary recipe: high egg, high sugar content, baked fresh 5 days a week at local bakeries near each location. Not shipped in bulk from a central facility. Local. Fresh. Every time. The buns have to be able to hold up against a genuinely juicy, never frozen patty without disintegrating. And getting that right at scale is an engineering problem most food companies would solve by just making the patty drier. Five Guys made the bun stronger instead. And then there are the fries, which have developed something close to a religious following among people who take French fries seriously. The company sources potatoes exclusively from north of the 42nd parallel in Idaho, because the colder climate slows the growing process and produces a denser, higher starch potato that fries better than anything grown in warmer conditions. Those potatoes are hand-cut daily at every location, soaked to remove excess starch, and cooked in 2 stages in 100% pure peanut oil. Every staff member goes through a mandatory fry calibration class to learn the exact relationship between water temperature, starch content, and frying time. For a side dish. That level of precision applied to a French fry is either completely insane or the most admirable thing in the restaurant industry, and the loyal customer base has clearly decided it's the latter. The menu itself has barely changed in 40 years. Burgers, hot dogs, grilled cheese, fries, and shakes, with a customization model that lets you build the burger exactly the way you want it from a list of 15 free toppings. That's it. No seasonal items. No limited-time offers designed to drive traffic. No chicken sandwich launching to compete with Chick-fil-A. Just a small, fixed menu executed with an obsessiveness that most companies reserve for their flagship product, applied uniformly to everything they serve. Chad Murrell runs training and quality control, and his specific area of obsession is fry calibration, which is exactly the kind of sentence that makes sense only when you understand that in this family, each son gravitates toward the function that suits his particular temperament. And Chad's temperament is apparently one that finds genuine satisfaction in ensuring that every fry coming out of every Five Guys on Earth meets the same standard. Jim handles menu development. Matt oversees construction and store design, personally visiting domestic locations to maintain consistency. Ben vets franchise partners, turning down applicants who don't align culturally with the family's values regardless of their financial qualifications. Tyler manages the proprietary bakery operations. And Jerry sits above all of it as the philosophical gatekeeper, the man who decides which principles are non-negotiable and ensures nobody drifts from them when the temptation to grow faster or cut corners gets loud enough to be heard in the boardroom. How they built a billion-dollar brand without spending a dollar on commercials. For most of Five Guys' history, the company had no marketing budget in any meaningful sense of the phrase. No television commercials, no radio spots, no billboards, no agency retainer, no Super Bowl ad, nothing. A company generating billions in revenue from a product that competes directly against some of the most heavily marketed brands in the world. And for decades, their entire customer acquisition strategy was making the burger good enough that the person who ate it would tell someone else about it. That sounds either naive or arrogant depending on your perspective, but the numbers suggest it worked exactly as intended. The money that would have gone to an advertising agency instead went into the most elaborate secret shopper program in the fast food industry. Every Five Guys location gets visited by anonymous shoppers twice a week. Not once a month, not quarterly, but twice every single week. And those shoppers are evaluating cleanliness, food quality, service speed, and the accuracy of custom orders. Locations that score well receive cash bonuses that go directly to the crew, not to the franchise owner, not to the manager, to the people making the food and taking the orders. The logic is elegant and simple in the same way the menu is. If the customer experience is the only marketing tool you have, then the people delivering that experience need to have a direct financial stake in making it excellent. You don't need a 30-second television spot if every customer who walks in leaves feeling like the food was worth twice what they paid. You don't need brand awareness campaigns if your customers are doing the talking for you, enthusiastically, because you gave them a genuine reason to. It worked so well for so long that when Five Guys finally broke from tradition in April 2026 and launched their first ever integrated marketing campaign, television spots, social media, the whole infrastructure, it was treated as genuine news in the industry. A company with over $3 billion in annual sales launching its first real advertising campaign 40 years into its existence is not a normal sentence, and it underscores just how far the Murrells had taken the word-of-mouth model before deciding it needed reinforcement. The campaign, called Your Burger Guy and built on a platform titled Satisfaction Perfected, wasn't about discounting or promotions. It was specifically designed to justify the price. To explain to a value-conscious consumer why a Five Guys burger costs more than a McDonald's burger, and why that difference is the point rather than a flaw. The transparent kitchen, the fresh beef, the hand-cut fries, the campaign essentially turned 4 decades of operational philosophy into a 30-second commercial and asked the audience if they finally understood what they'd been eating. The crazy money behind the simplicity. Here is where the Five Guys story moves from inspiring to genuinely sophisticated, because the financial architecture the Murrells have constructed around their simple burger operation is anything but simple. The company reports annual revenues consistently above $1 billion, with global system-wide sales reaching approximately $3.4 billion across 2024 and 2025. The Murrell family retains an estimated 75% majority stake in the enterprise, which means they have never allowed outside pressure to dictate how they run the business, what they put on the menu, or how fast they grow. That level of control in a company this size is extraordinarily rare, and maintaining it while still funding aggressive international expansion requires a creative approach to capital that goes well beyond a standard bank loan. Five Guys has pioneered the use of what's called whole business securitization to fund its growth without diluting family ownership. In plain terms, this means the company takes its most reliable cash-generating assets, franchise agreements, intellectual property royalties, revenue from the Five Guys bakery subsidiary, and pools them into separate legal entities that then issue notes to institutional investors. The investors get a rated, secured return backed by the predictable cash flows of a globally recognized brand. The Murrells get access to capital at competitive rates without giving up a single percentage point of ownership or handing a board seat to anyone with a different agenda. Between 2021 and 2023, the company raised $950 million through 3 separate securitization issuances: $250 million in 2021, $200 million in 2022, and $500 million in 2023. That is nearly $1 billion in growth capital accessed, while the family kept every decision inside the building. The debt service coverage ratio as of 2025 sat at 2.19 times, meaning the company generates more than twice the cash flow needed to service its debt obligations, which is a number that keeps institutional investors comfortable and the Murrells firmly in the driver's seat. On the franchise side, the economics are structured to reward operators who execute well and penalize those who drift from the standard. Domestic franchisees pay a 6% royalty on gross sales. International operators pay 7.4%. A well-run Five Guys unit generates between $150,000 and $200,000 in net profit annually for the franchisee. which isn't a get-rich-quick number, but is a reliable, sustainable return on an initial investment that runs between $300,000 and $650,000, a fraction of what it costs to open a Wendy's or a Taco Bell. The relatively low barrier to entry combined with the brand's cult-level loyalty makes Five Guys franchises among the most sought after in the industry. And Ben Murrell's job of vetting applicants for cultural alignment rather than just financial qualification ensures that the people operating the stores understand what they're agreeing to before they sign anything. The lawsuits, the data breach, and the BOGO disaster. For a company built on the idea that doing things right is worth any inconvenience, Five Guys has had some genuinely uncomfortable moments in the institutional spotlight, and each one reveals something real about the gap between a family's philosophy and the realities of running a 30,000-person global operation. In 2023, the company settled a class action lawsuit in California for $1.2 million after more than 2,200 employees alleged that managers in training and other staff were systematically denied meal and rest breaks and required to work off the clock without proper compensation. Federal judges rejected the initial settlement 4 separate times, citing inadequate restitution for workers and excessive attorney fees, before a final version was accepted. For a company whose entire brand identity rests on treating people well, the secret shopper bonuses, the crew cash distributions, the paternal warmth of Jerry Murrell's public persona, a labor violation case of this scope in California was an uncomfortable contradiction, and the 4 rejections from federal judges made it impossible to quietly resolve. The following year brought a different kind of exposure. In December 2022, Five Guys disclosed a network security breach that had occurred 3 months earlier in September, during which attackers accessed the names, social security numbers, and driver's license numbers of over 37,000 current, former, and prospective employees. A $700,000 class action settlement was approved in early 2024. For a company that had spent 4 decades protecting its privacy with almost fanatical intensity, the irony of failing to protect the private data of the people who worked for it was not lost on observers, and the breach forced a rapid modernization of IT infrastructure that the company's lean operational philosophy had apparently allowed to lag behind its growth. And then came February 2026 and the BOGO crisis, which managed to be simultaneously the most chaotic and most humanizing moment in the company's 40-year history. To celebrate its 40th anniversary, Five Guys launched its first-ever national Buy One Get One Free promotion on February 17th. Jerry Murrell, who had spent his entire career as a skeptic of price-based promotions, agreed to it as a one-time celebration. What followed was a masterclass in underestimating your own brand equity. Stores saw a 130% surge in sales. Lines stretched out the door and down the block. Locations across the country ran out of food entirely. The app crashed under the weight of nearly 150,000 downloads in a single day. Crews were exhausted, systems were overwhelmed, and the anniversary celebration that was supposed to be a thank you to loyal customers turned into an operational emergency that left a lot of those customers standing in line for a burger that never arrived. Jerry Murrell's response was to write $1.5 million in bonus checks, $1,000 each to workers across 1,500 locations, and publicly joke that he issued them because he didn't want anyone shooting him in the back. The comment went viral, partly because it was funny, and partly because the instinct behind it, take care of the people who bore the weight of your mistake, was completely consistent with the family's actual values regardless of how the joke landed. A second BOGO event was held in March, digital only this time, with the logistical controls that should have been in place from the beginning. The India gamble and the limits of simplicity. As the North American market approaches saturation, 1,900 locations is a lot of burger joints. Five Guys is looking outward with an ambition that would have been hard to imagine from that first Arlington takeout counter. And nowhere is that ambition more visible or more complicated than in the company's 2026 push into India. India is a market of 1.4 billion people, a rapidly expanding middle class with growing appetite for premium dining experiences, and a cultural relationship with beef and pork that makes Five Guys' core menu essentially non-functional as written. The Murrells had 2 choices: skip the market or rebuild the product for it. They chose to rebuild, which for a family that considers simplicity sacred, required a level of creative flexibility that didn't come naturally. The localized Indian menu is approximately 70% vegetarian, built around the same customization model that defines the brand globally, but applied to proteins and flavor profiles designed specifically for the Indian palate. The Aloo Masala Delight, a spiced potato patty with mint coriander chutney, sits alongside a paneer tikka supreme with tandoori mayo and a butter chicken burger with makhani sauce. The Kerala Fish Fry Burger uses local sear fish with coconut curry mayo. The Mango Lassi Shake blends a traditional lassi base with the Five Guys shake platform. The no-freezer philosophy stays intact. The fresh preparation standard stays intact. The bespoke sourcing stays intact. Essentially, everything that makes Five Guys survives the cultural translation, just expressed through completely different ingredients. To anchor the launch, the family partnered with Virat Kohli, India's most recognizable sporting figure, as a brand ambassador, aligning the Five Guys premium positioning with a man whose public identity is built almost entirely around fitness, discipline, and the deliberate rejection of shortcuts. The campaign specifically targets McDonald's and other frozen patty competitors with viral content showing how a Five Guys burger decays naturally over time while heavily processed alternatives do not, which is either a brilliant piece of transparency marketing or the most aggressive competitive attack in fast food history, and probably both. The India play is the clearest indication yet that the Murrells understand something important about the next phase of their empire. The simplicity that works in Arlington, Virginia, and London, England, and Dubai, UAE, needs to be flexible enough to survive in markets where the simple version of the product doesn't actually exist yet. The family that built its fortune on refusing to adapt has quietly learned how to adapt without losing itself in the process. The third generation and the next 40 years. Here is the part of the Five Guys story that almost never gets written, because most business coverage of family empires focuses on the founder and the founding and the growth, and stops paying attention right around the moment the grandchildren show up. But the grandchildren are exactly where this story is headed, and the Murrells have been preparing for that transition with the same methodical intention they bring to everything else. As of 2026, approximately 10 of Jerry Murrell's 14 grandchildren are working inside the company in various capacities. 10 out of 14. In a family business, that number represents either an extraordinary level of genuine enthusiasm for the enterprise or a deeply effective culture of expectation passed down through the family, and in this case, it appears to be genuinely both. The third generation has grown up inside the Five Guys philosophy the way other children grow up inside a religion, not as an external set of rules imposed on them, but as the ambient atmosphere of their entire childhood. The no-freezer policy isn't a corporate mandate to them. It's just how food works. The financial architecture underpinning the empire, the whole business securitization model, the franchise royalty structure, the bakery subsidiary, is designed to generate stable, recurring cash flows that can sustain a family of this size across multiple generations without requiring anyone to sell the company or take it public. The debt obligations are real and require continued top-line growth to maintain the current coverage ratios, which means the Indian expansion and the continued international push aren't optional adventures. They're structural necessities for a company that has leveraged its future against its own brand strength. The technological modernization happening in parallel, a partnership with SoundHound AI to automate ordering functions, quality assurance automation through Novatio Solutions, suggests the Murrells understand that hands-on family management doesn't scale to 2,000 locations without technological infrastructure holding the consistency together. The five brothers can't physically be in every store, and the third generation can't either. The answer isn't to lower the standard. The answer is to build systems that enforce the standard regardless of who's behind the counter. Jerry Murrell started this whole thing with less than $70,000 and his mother's advice about good hamburgers. 40 years later, his family controls a global empire worth multiple billions, has never answered to a shareholder, has never compromised the product for the sake of margin, and is currently training the generation after the founders to carry all of it forward on the same principles it started with. The names on the door have always been the five brothers. The hand on the wheel has always been the family behind them. And if the last 4 decades are any indication, Neither of those things is changing anytime soon. The next time you're standing in a Five Guys waiting on a burger that's being made from beef that arrived this morning by someone who went through a fry calibration class to earn the right to cook your fries, in a building with no freezer and no drive-thru and no seasonal menu, remember that somewhere in the background, a family that most people have never heard of made 1,000 decisions to keep it exactly that way. And every single one of those decisions was a choice to stay private, stay simple, and trust that the burger would do the talking. 40 years in, it still is. If you want more deep dives into the family empires running the world from the shadows, you know where to find us. Subscribe to Global Status.